You're trying to stop us, which is now really concerning.
Oh, wait, just listen.
You're gonna get arrested for obstructing police.
All right.
What the f is that? That's a person.
The date was May 12, 2020, and it's a time most of us would rather forget. As you know, lockdown had pretty much smothered the world into silence, especially over in England. Roads that used to be packed with cars were now just long, empty concrete strips. Honestly, whole cities were starting to feel deserted, almost as quiet as the countryside and forests. I mean, just hearing a car go by was something you'd actually notice, no matter where you were. And way out in the Forest of Dean, somebody noticed something pretty weird that evening. On a narrow road just outside the town of Coeford, a local saw a single car driving through the dark. The strange part was, it wasn't just passing through. It seemed to be circling the area, like the driver was looking for something. Feeling a little uneasy and maybe a bit curious, the local decided to call the police. After a quick license plate check, the officers realized the car was registered to an owner living in Wolverhampton, almost 80 miles away. Okay, looking back, it does sound a little over the top. Imagine the cops getting all worked up because a car was 80 miles from where it's supposed to be. It feels kind of dystopian, like something right out of a movie. But at that point in the pandemic, traveling that far was totally against the rules. Everyone was supposed to stay put while we figured this whole COVID thing out. So, when a lone driver is seen zigzagging around the countryside in the middle of the night, well, yeah, you could say some eyebrows got raised. When police officers pulled the driver over, they caught the moment on body cam. You can see the driver step out, looking really anxious, and he insisted he was just waiting for a friend. The officers reminded him this was still a lockdown. Unless his friend was having a medical emergency, he had no business being there. With no clear crime and nothing obviously illegal, they just gave him a warning and told him to go home. But as the car's taillights faded into the dark, something about that whole stop just didn't feel right to them. Less than an hour later, those same officers were patrolling that same stretch of road again. A gut feeling had brought them back, and that's when they saw more headlights, caught in a weird silhouette near the entrance to Stofield Quarry. It turned out to be the same car, now pulled over with the engine off. And next to it was a single person standing beside two big suitcases. The body cam footage from that moment shows everything. Whoever this woman was, she seemed both worried and defensive. And as the cops moved closer, she got even more erratic. Back then, nobody knew what she was hiding. But it became pretty obvious to the officers that she was desperate to keep whatever was in those suitcases a secret. Almost like she was hiding a body in there. Spoiler alert, she was, "You knew your property. He's trying. You're trying to stop us," which is now really concerning.
See? You're trying to stop us, which is now really concerning.
No, wait, just listen.
You're gonna get arrested for obstructing police.
All right, I don't wanna stop you guys.
You are stopping it. You are stopping us.
Okay, could I just explain, because as I said before, like
Step away, please.
I've had issues with that before.
Step away, please.
Just stand there. Okay.
What the f is that? That's a person. You are under arrest.
Yeah.
That's a fucking person.
Inside the first suitcase, officers found human remains. And the second one? That held even more. No surprise. Both the woman standing there and the driver were arrested right then and taken to the local station for questioning. But that would only lead to more unsettling questions. I mean, it leaves us with some pretty huge ones, right? First off, who exactly was this woman? And why was she standing in the dark with a dismembered body stuffed into two suitcases? And just to add another one, why was she 80 miles from home during a national lockdown with luggage you'd never take on vacation? Well, whatever you're thinking right now, the truth is actually way darker than anyone expected. But let's start at the beginning and talk about our first suspect, Carissa. Her full name was Carissa Conita Gordon, and she was a Jamaican national, 28 years old at the time of her arrest. Born in Jamaica, she spent her first few years under the sun. But everything changed for her when she was just 7 years old. Imagine living in a bright, warm, colorful country and then being ripped away to England. For Carissa, that was her reality. Before she knew it, she was flown across the Atlantic to live with her aunt. She was suddenly dropped into a new world with new accents, new weather, new rules, and new expectations. Even later, when her mother followed her, the family never really fit back together the same way. She moved to North London and went to an all-girls state secondary school. And while her early years in the UK looked normal from the outside, her late teen years took a really bad turn. Somewhere along the line, Carissa got tangled up with an older man who exploited her and forced her into sex work. She got trapped in an abusive and exploitative relationship. By adulthood, Carissa was a woman shaped by trauma. Psychologists would later diagnose her with a personality disorder, with a low tolerance for frustration and really intense struggles with rejection. And of course, that's a dangerous mix when it's left untreated. Fast forward to 2020, and Carissa had escaped London, hoping for a better life. That's when she ended up in a refuge for vulnerable women in the Lozells area of West Birmingham, a place designed to give people stability and, most of all, safety. And it was inside that refuge that she met another resident, someone else trying to rebuild her life, someone Carissa took quite a liking to. Her name was Phoenix Nets. Born in the early 1990s in Croydon, South London, Phoenix was the only child of her parents, Mark and Saskia. They described her as supportive, loving, and a fantastic daughter. Until she was 11, Phoenix went to the Parish Church Junior School in her hometown. It's one of those classic South London primary schools where everyone knows everyone and childhood feels like one long blur of classrooms, playgrounds, and inside jokes. Her classmates remembered her as bright and articulate. She loved drama, adored performing, and for a little while was even really into horseback riding. She was one of those kids who had a spark that suggested a really bright future ahead. It's a shame that, unfortunately, that future never happened. By her late teens, Phoenix was ready for her independence. In 2009, she left home to move to Kent, where she enrolled at Canterbury Christ Church University. This was all part of her plan because Phoenix dreamed of becoming a paramedic. She was driven, compassionate, and someone who genuinely wanted to help others. But somewhere between her first and second year, her path slowly started to crack. Unfortunately, Phoenix left university before finishing her degree. And while we don't know exactly why, there's always a reason. Those closest to her said she struggled with depression, occasional drug use, and the general pressure to succeed. Despite all this, Phoenix and her parents always kept a really strong bond. They always supported her, and in return, she loved them deeply. After dropping out of university, Phoenix traveled northwest to the city of Birmingham, a place she somehow grew to love. But by late 2019, cracks started to show again. Her situation got more fragile, and that's how she found herself in the same refuge as Carissa. The building was shared accommodation. It had communal kitchens, narrow hallways, and small private rooms branching off from each other. It wasn't glamorous by any means, but it was a safe place that offered support and stability for vulnerable women, which is exactly what we need more of in this world. And in theory, it was temporary. Phoenix definitely saw it that way too. Even though she was just settling into the refuge, her mind was already drifting back toward home. She planned to return to London and move back in with her parents as soon as she could. But, of course, that had to wait until all the pandemic restrictions eased up, and only then could she legally travel back. However, as the lockdown dragged on and dates kept getting pushed back, that escape plan kept getting delayed. And while Phoenix waited for her chance, that's when she crossed paths with Carissa. And that connection would turn into a nightmare. By early 2020, both Phoenix and Carissa were living in neighboring rooms inside that refuge. So, over time, the two started talking. From what we know, it seems they weren't the most compatible friends, and they weren't even that close. Their bond formed more out of proximity than choice. But as winter slowly turned to spring, the atmosphere between them began to change. By February, Phoenix had started telling her friends that things felt off with Carissa. And when I say off, I'm not talking about small arguments. I'm talking about Carissa repeatedly asking Phoenix for sex. This wasn't romantic interest or even misguided affection. It was just this weird, obsessive fixation. And for Phoenix, it was deeply unwanted. The imbalance was pretty stark. Phoenix was polite, kind, and wanted to keep the peace. Meanwhile, Carissa became this increasingly volatile and horny mess. Then came April 11th, 2020. That night, Carissa called the Samaritans, both drunk and distressed. She talked to the operator about liking another woman and wanting to have sex with her. In her own words, she told the operator that, quote, Her loins were hot. Just a quick side note, can we please ban that phrase from ever being said again? That same night, the UK entered a strict lockdown. Visitors weren't allowed, movements were limited, and support services already stretched thin were suddenly reduced. Staff at the Refuge were rotated in and out, too. Isolation hit everyone differently, but for Phoenix, it made her situation way worse. The lockdown meant she couldn't leave, and it also meant she couldn't put any physical distance between herself and the person who was starting to scare her. Instead, she was trapped with the very person she feared, separated only by a thin bedroom wall. They used the same shared kitchen, passed each other in the same narrow hallway, and shared the same bathroom too. And of course, while all this was happening, the tension kept building. Now, Phoenix was trying to stay positive. She was texting her friends, saying she planned to leave as soon as restrictions eased. But over time, you could tell her messages got more anxious. For example, in one text sent on April 7th, she said, "There's a girl here who keeps asking me to be sexual. I think I'm going to have to move back to London. It's scaring me, LOL." Meanwhile, Carissa's behavior got even more erratic. Her fixation deepened, her emotional state grew more unstable. And with every passing day, Phoenix found herself with fewer places to retreat, fewer chances to get away, and fewer people physically around to step in. And in the early hours of April 16th, 2020, the whole thing reached its breaking point. It was early that morning and Phoenix was still awake. She was on the phone with a friend, again saying she wished she could go home as soon as lockdown was over. But shortly after that call, Carissa barged through the bedroom door, stabbed Phoenix 4 times in the chest, and left her there, mortally wounded. The most haunting part is that this wasn't a quick story. Phoenix was left to die alone for several hours, unable to call for help because Carissa had stolen her phone. One of the most frustrating things is that all the other women in the Refuge heard strange noises coming from Phoenix's room in the hours after, including banging, scraping, and even the faint sound of a woman crying. In fact, several of them said they heard her saying, "Help me," for several heartbreaking, grueling hours. Phoenix must have felt ignored as she faded in and out of consciousness, wondering why nobody was coming to save her. Between 10:04 p.m. and 3:07 p.m., Carissa used Phoenix's phone to make several desperate searches. These included how to fix a punctured lung, internal bleeding, and can someone recover from getting stabbed. Later that afternoon, a friend of Phoenix's tried calling her mobile but got no answer. At first, she wasn't too worried. But as the hours passed, that worry started to creep in. And the horrible thing is that while Phoenix was fighting for her life, Carissa was already starting to plan how to get rid of her. By the morning of April 17th, 2020, Carissa had fully switched into cover-up mode. Seen here in surveillance footage, she bought a 45-pound circular saw on Gumtree and had it delivered straight to the Refuge after it arrived. Just before 11 o'clock a.m., Carissa started to dismember Phoenix's body. What followed was the total erasure of Phoenix's room. The mattress vanished. Her bed frame disappeared, and both the carpet and its underlay were ripped up. Everything was thrown out and the floor underneath was scrubbed down so hard the room reeked of bleach. She also hired a couple of people to remove the evidence, telling them it was just waste. As seen from nearby surveillance cameras, you can see 2 men carrying rolled up carpets and heavy black bags out of the house, completely unaware they were helping clean up after a murder. With the room now stripped, Carissa turned her attention to Phoenix's mobile phone and social media. She started impersonating her, sending texts to her housing support manager, her friends, and even her parents. Carissa's texts mimicked everything perfectly, from her emojis to her abbreviations right down to the number of kisses she'd use. Most people genuinely believed Phoenix was okay. And that's when the deception went even further. She combined homicide with AI. Carissa downloaded a voice editing app and started crafting new audio messages using Phoenix's voice from old recordings. Apparently, the results were creepily real. So, I guess you could say that even though Phoenix was already gone, Carissa was keeping her alive online. Meanwhile, Phoenix's remains had been wrapped and packed into 2 large suitcases. And in the days after, surveillance cameras all over Birmingham would unknowingly record Carissa's strange, frantic movements. One clip showed her cycling through quiet residential streets with a heavy suitcase. Later, she showed up at a police station, agitated, unsettled, and clutching her phone. She claimed she needed to charge her iPhone and was supposed to meet a friend in the area. But when the officers asked for ID, Carissa seemed both panicked and hesitant. The next day, another camera caught her going into a home bargain store, where she bought cleaning products and a sleeping bag. She paid in cash and left abruptly. She then booked a taxi the following morning, where yet another surveillance camera captured her getting out of the taxi at a gas station. Sensing something was off about the situation, the taxi driver actually abandoned her. Of course, this left Carissa both stranded and panicked. And in a moment of pure genius-level stupidity, she then decided to do the one thing you absolutely should not do while trying to hide a body. She called the police. Carissa claimed the taxi driver had stolen her bag. But when the officer asked what was inside so they could track it, she immediately backpedaled, saying the driver had actually returned it after all. By now, even the surveillance cameras were probably thinking, bless her, she's trying. The next day, CCTV caught her again, this time boarding a train toward Coalford, to the Forest of Dean, to finish what she'd started. She then made several searches on Phoenix's phone, including, how do killers get caught? Can bodies burn to ashes with petrol? And what happens when you burn a body with petrol? Proving once again that criminals don't get caught because the police are psychic, but because they make ridiculous Google searches like they're auditioning for prison. When she finally reached the forest, Carissa camped beside the suitcases, literally sleeping right next to Phoenix's remains without a second thought. For multiple days, she wandered around the quarry's paths, exhausted and disheveled. For whatever reason, it seemed Carissa couldn't bring herself to bury the remains. Burning the body didn't seem to work either, because without a strong accelerant, the suitcase never caught fire the way she'd imagined. After leaving the forest, another camera captured her journey back toward Birmingham. A gas station camera recorded her filling plastic jerry cans with fuel. The footage shows her standing rigidly over the nozzle, watching the containers fill, and then walking back into the city through Gumtree. She then hired a man named Mahesh Surasha, paying him to drive her from Birmingham to the rural outskirts of Coalford. At 5 p.m. on May 12, 2020, Mahesh picked Carissa up and drove toward Gloucestershire. She asked him to stop near the entrance to a quarry, said she needed to get something, and told him to come back later. The thing is, Carissa would never actually return. And because she basically disappeared, Mahesh got worried about her safety. Because he was anxious, he started circling the area to find her. And because he was circling, a watchful neighbor called the cops. And of course, that's exactly how our story unraveled. Which leads us back to that body cam footage where they found Carissa and a suitcase full of human remains. What the is that? That's a person. You are under arrest. Yeah, that's a underscore person. 507. Can we get you down in ASAP, please? Urgent. When police officers finally opened those two big suitcases, the black trash bags inside confirmed their worst fears. So surprise, surprise, both Carissa and Mahesh were arrested immediately. They were processed, photographed, and put in an interview room. Apparently, all of Carissa's answers seemed to contradict each other. First, she said she was meeting a friend. Then she said she was traveling for no reason at all. Then she even claimed she had no idea what was in those suitcases. Meanwhile, Mahesh was busy spilling everything he knew, and it became pretty clear early on that he had no part in Phoenix's murder. He was just a driver hired off Gumtree. You could say he was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Thankfully, he wouldn't have to pay a hefty price. But for Carissa, well, that was a totally different story. And honestly, it wasn't looking good. I mean, if it wasn't all the surveillance footage that was going to screw her over, it would be the countless Google searches she made on Phoenix's phone. And if that wasn't enough, when they finally searched her bedroom back in Birmingham, they found a hacksaw with Phoenix's blood all over it. In April of 2021, Carissa's trial finally began. The prosecution laid out all the messages, Google searches, surveillance footage, and forensic evidence. And the jury was horrified to learn that Phoenix could have survived for up to 12 hours after the attack if anyone had stepped in to help. The surprising thing here is that Carissa's defense didn't try to claim she was innocent. Instead, her lawyers talked about mental health struggles, PTSD, and a life defined by trauma and exploitation, including being forced into sex work by an older man years before. He also described his client as volatile, damaged, and unable to handle herself under pressure, which of course wasn't an excuse but an explanation for the instability behind her crimes. But one thing that definitely didn't help Carissa was a letter from her own mother, where she described her daughter as, quote, a ticking time bomb who never got the support she needed. To be fair, she insisted Carissa wasn't inherently a bad person, but someone who was failed repeatedly by the system. Throughout the court proceedings, Phoenix's family gave multiple victim impact statements. Her father said their lives had been changed forever and that their pain was indescribable. Her mother described herself as forever devastated and forever empty. The judge called Carissa a very dangerous woman and described the crime as callous, calculating, and evil. After that, she sentenced Carissa to life in prison with a minimum term of 23 years and 6 months. In the aftermath of this case, housing providers across Birmingham reassessed their safety procedures because, honestly, they clearly needed to. At the same time, charities also looked at how risk is spotted in shared housing, and the publicity around this case sparked calls for better communication between mental health services and housing providers. Now, what I think is the most heartbreaking part of this case is how avoidable Phoenix's death really was. What's horrifying and despicable is that even after being stabbed, she lay there on that bedroom floor crying out for help for 12 grueling hours. And despite several neighbors hearing her, nobody stepped in to do anything. As for Carissa, well, she clearly became fixated on Phoenix for reasons we'll never fully understand. And even though we don't know the why or the how or the moment it all started, we do know that over time those feelings got stronger. It's very clear Carissa had no idea what to do with those feelings. And left unchecked, they twisted into something unstable, then something obsessive, and then something dangerous. What really bothers me here is how all of this happened inside a refuge, a place that's meant to be a last resort where safety is guaranteed. For Phoenix to have that final sanctuary fall apart must have been nothing short of devastating. And I truly hope her family is finding a path toward healing. And with that said, I think that just about wraps up our case today, folks. But before I go, I'd love to know what you think about this one. Because of course, Carissa's trauma and mental health do muddy the waters a bit. So do you think Carissa got the punishment she deserved? Or maybe you think she should have gotten more? As always, share your thoughts down below. And it turns out we're getting really close to Christmas now. So Merry Christmas to you, your family, and your friends. And Happy Holidays to you wherever you are in the world. Thanks so much for being here so close to the festive season. Hope you have a great time off no matter how long or short it is. Thank you so much for watching today. And as always, I'll see you again very soon for another video. Until that moment arrives though, remember to look after yourselves. Look after each other, thank you, and goodbye.